This past year and our experience with COVID has changed the church landscape significantly. Throughout this series, we're going to look at the book of Acts being a blueprint and what it means to have an intentional church life and growth experience in the post-pandemic era. In this chapter, we are going to look at what it means for us right now. What is our reality, our faith, and our God? Welcome. Join with me as we explore what the church is called to be for this time and in this place. The reality is that all mainline Christian denominations have been experiencing a steady decline for some time. In this graph from the Billy Graham Center, it shows that between 1975 and 2015, there has been a 64% decline experienced for all mainline Protestant churches and a 68% decline for all other churches that identify with being Christian. So, prior to COVID, what does this realistically mean for the life of the church in America? Greg Smith with So What Faith in 2015 projected that the U.S. was undergoing a radical shift in our religious landscape. In this chart, based on statistics prior to COVID, by the year 2070, mainline Protestants will be projected as making up less than 3% of the general population in the United States. In the midst of this historic decline, at the beginning of 2020, the COVID pandemic began to rapidly move across the world. At this time, many of us had no idea how devastating it would become. Suddenly, our reality changed almost overnight. Businesses closed, schools closed, and churches closed. In the past year, in the U.S., there has so far been 30 million confirmed cases, resulting sadly with 543,000 deaths. Then, during the summer, civil unrest and riots began to erupt throughout the United States due to community response to the death of people of color involving law enforcement officers. Images of our communities burning bombarded us daily. These images reflected the suffering, the dying, and the hurting that was being experienced all around us. And it became the norm during the summer of 2020. We must not underestimate how much the past year and the experiences of summer 2020 will reshape how the church will need to be the church in this new era. In the book, Growing the Post-Pandemic Church, Dr. Bob Weitzel contends that there are some key long-term church effects that we will need to understand. The first is that people will get out of the habit of regular church attendance. The anxiety of COVID has traumatized us, and there is an emotional response when thinking of in-person gatherings. Churches must now be intentional about creating and balancing in-person worship, discipleship, and fellowship alongside with online opportunities that are just as meaningful for worship, discipleship, and fellowship. Secondly, people will find alternative online communities if the church doesn't step up. Even though we have high anxiety about in-person gatherings, we crave connection. People were made to be relationship people. If the church does not provide an online opportunity for people to engage and socialize and connect, then they will seek out other online communities in order to meet this need. And those communities don't need to be spiritual in nature. This is a case where if the church does not step in and provide something, people will go elsewhere to have their need met. Additionally, many people will withdraw from hugging and physical contact. This is due to prolonged anxiety about COVID. As a result, this means that eye contact and facial expressions will become more vital in helping people feel welcomed and connected. We must be intentional about giving 100% of our attention to the person that is in front of us if we want them to walk away from that interaction feeling embraced. Lastly, the offering plate will most likely disappear. As our online campus begins to grow and we seek to balance in-person and online experiences, we must make sure that the online giving opportunities are easy to access and are user-friendly. These are some incredible areas that we will have to be navigating during this post-pandemic era. Today, as we look around in our communities, we find ourselves in a landscape that we don't want to be in, but yet we are called to serve. Many people have been plunged into isolation, fear, and perhaps even spiritual crisis. Where is God in the midst of this profound suffering and death? To begin to answer this question, let us turn to the prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel was called to be the prophet during the Babylonian exile and served the people of God who were experiencing a crisis of faith and an inability to worship God in any form of normal way. Their temple was gone, their ability to gather was gone, and all hope and joy was gone. Then, in the middle of this despair, God spoke. Ezekiel 37, verses 1 through 14. The hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of the valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw so many great bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, Prophesy to these bones and say to them, Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded. And as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked at the tendons, and the flesh appeared upon them, and the skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. He said to me, Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of Man, and say to it, This is what the Sovereign Lord God says. Come, breathe from the four winds and breath into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, Our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore prophesy to them. This is what the Sovereign Lord God says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord. And when I open your graves and bring you up from them, I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it, declares the Lord. Today, we gather at the top of our valleys that are filled with dry bones, bones of sorrow, of anger and frustration, bones of death, death of life, of dreams, of jobs, of gathering together, of life before COVID. There are bones of injustice, loss of human dignity and value, and the loss of unity. Bones of trauma, of depression, and anxiety. As we gaze upon these bones, church, we are at a critical moment in time. We must decide if what we profess to believe about God is real, and if it is, then we must have the courage to press forward. Because God is speaking to us today, just as God did to Ezekiel yesterday. And God is asking us, do you believe that I can bring life to these bones? The future of our church hinges on our answer to this question. To prepare for this week's discussion group, reflect on the following questions. What today might we have in common with the people of God that Ezekiel was called to serve when God gave him the vision of the Valley of Dry Bones? What are some of the bones that we see laying in the valley before us? And lastly, what does it mean for the church to press forward? What might that look like? Thank you, and we'll see you again next week. God bless.